Our second speaker is Sukhbir, who grew up on the Monterey Peninsula and moved to the Sacramento area in hopes of becoming the next female sports broadcaster. She went to Sac State, then took a job with the Sacramento Kings. As much as she loved sports, there was something missing to connect her to her soul's purpose. So her search continued. Montessori teaching training, Kundalini teacher training, that's my tongue, trekking Nepal, backpacking Europe, owning a yoga studio, co-producing the California Spirit Festival, and currently she now owns and operates a restaurant. Talk about varied. Yeah. Sukhbir says, each one of these moments has played an integral role in who she is as a human. She realized that she put herself in positions of leadership and community so that she had to show up. She now realizes that she had to be faced with challenges outside of herself so that she would not become so me-centered. Her intention for 2018 is simply we. Please welcome to Sac Soul Talks, Sukhbir. Where are you? There you are.
A couple of months ago, I had a conversation with God with the topic of returning to teaching. That I'm ready to step back and fully asking for guidance on what that should look like, because I really don't know. I was hesitant because the last time I stated something as clear as that, I was on all fours, similar, on my bedroom floor, and said that all I want is, God, just let me be of service. Just let me be of service. Any way that I can serve, just show me how, and I'll do it. And less than a year later, I was serving tables on a Sunday morning, adrenaline running from a brunch rush, and remembering that conversation flashing back and thought, next time I should be more specific. Because of course, that kind of service looked nothing like what I thought it should look like, but it was, of course, exactly what I needed. Flash forward a couple weeks ago, and I get a phone call in the middle of our staff Christmas party, and it's a gentleman you might know by the name of RJ. We have exchanged messages in the past about potential speaking at a Soul Talk, but I was not jumping for joy at the invite. Reason being, I'm terrified of public speaking. It gives me tremendous anxiety, so naturally I steer clear of it at all costs. Some of you who know me as a teacher may find that hard to believe, but when I'm teaching Kundalini Yoga, I'm not public speaking. I'm in the teachings of the divine, and I'm teaching the teachings that have been given forth by a master. I feel protected and I feel safe. Public speaking, however, makes me feel vulnerable, and vulnerability always has made me feel unsafe. Hence my work. Hence my conversation with God about returning to teaching. And hence the phone call a couple weeks ago. Hence the yes, and hence me standing here. To make things worse, RJ says, we're having this event in like 10 days, and I was wondering if you could speak. My stomach drops. Actually, I really did think I was going to throw up. And maybe you can touch base on that event that happened to you at Rayleigh's a month or so ago. My stomach drops even deeper. So, of course, I do what any terrified and scared person with anxiety does, and I say yes. Why? Because I know that practicing being vulnerable about things that are messy and sensitive and hard is the only way to get me closer to being a more compassionate person who knows their worth and has what it takes. So what happened at Rayleigh's? I was coming home from work at the restaurant when I stopped by our local Rayleigh's, and I have a really bad habit of waiting until the last minute to go pee. And so I ran into the store and directly to the bathroom, and pulled down my pants and sat down to go pee. And within 2 seconds, there was a man laying on the floor, looking up and underneath my legs. I screamed at him, and I ran out of the stall to greet him, screaming, and then struggling our way out of the bathroom into the store where I yelled for help. And he ran down the aisle, out of the store, and into his car. I had made my way out of the parking lot, shaking and sobbing, asking the Rayleigh's employees to give me a second as I climbed into my car and called my husband and asked him for support. He was there within minutes, and then it all began. The inventory of all the other times that I had been violated. What I thought I had healed from was made clear that the moment was still so fresh in my bones. So I started to go back. I went back to being 23. I went back to my first major breakup. I had little to no ability to cope with it, and a friend of mine said, let's go try yoga. Okay, so this was 20 years ago. There wasn't a lot of yoga going on at that time, but there was this gentleman named Sirian who was hosting classes on 23rd and T through the Learning Exchange, and we signed up for 6 of them. I was really mortified after the first one of the fact that I'd even signed up for 6 because they were so weird and extremely uncomfortable. Extremely uncomfortable. So what do I do when I feel extremely out of sorts and uncomfortable? I went back. There was a belly laughing exercise, which I don't know if you guys have ever belly laughed, but if you haven't, you fake it till you make it, and it sure does release a lot of anxiety. By the time all 6 classes were finished, as strange as I found the experience, I felt so much better, so I signed up for a teacher training. I'm recognizing the weirdness in my personality here, but just keep going back into it. So this teacher training required us to show up for 40 straight days at 4 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. And if you didn't show up one of those days or were late by 15 minutes, you didn't get certified. So, and we had to eat only mung beans and rice, which ended up being an incredible experience, but it was gut-wrenching at the same time. So this training was my first real experience at returning myself back to the divine. I was born a very God-centered child. I had a very deep connection to Madonna, and would watch VHS videos on her appearing in different places around the world from a very early age. And my mom would often call the street corner where the church was, and she would ask if I was there, and I would be there. And they're like, yeah, she's in there talking to God. So I lost that connection through some experience in my life. So this was my first real experience at returning back to the divine, the real connection with God, a God I had totally come to hate. This training was my first step toward healing. I remember being at week 5 at your house, at Krishna Guadalupe's house, and we had to be honest about what our intention for healing was. What I thought was to heal from this breakup ended up being much deeper. I dug deeper and had to be vulnerable about what it was. Again, vulnerability, I started to feel sick. Shaky, but I knew now was the time. I had to be honest about being raped by a friend of our family when I was 15. This experience took my virginity. We were asked during that weekend to take something that symbolized our burden and burn it in the fire. I had a letter from this person, and this letter described the event, and it was all the proof that I had that I needed to convict this person. That was 8 years prior. That was something that I wasn't able to talk to my parents about because of the way that we were raised. Not because my parents weren't good parents, it's because they did what they knew. They did their best. I had held on to that letter for 8 years. It was at that moment I knew I had to let it go. So I stood over that fire for what seemed like a very long time. And I realized that letting it go meant that I had to let go of the power of that experience over me. I did not know how to do that. I did not know how to be that person who wasn't that victim. But I did it anyway. It was my first experience in true group vulnerability. Krishna took me aside, It's so weird that you're here. Krishna took me aside. As the rest of the group went in and as I sobbed, he sat with me and invited me to do a breath of fire with him. For a long time, we sat, doing the breath form that moved the energy of that moment through me. I took a risk. I did something different than what I knew. I got messy. I made it through. I had what it took. So hence, the next time my relationship came around, I was in a much better space. It was healthier because I was healthier. I was able to give more of myself to this person than I had ever given before. We were together over 6 years. It was an amazing love story. Then on the morning of March 28th of 2007, we woke up, we made love, and 2 minutes later, I was giving him CPR on the bedroom floor. My life was forever changed. Love now equaled the most amount of pain I've ever experienced. The grief that I had scared the crap out of me. So I medicated heavily for close to a year. But then I recommitted to Kundalini Yoga, to teacher training, to regaining my strength, to stepping back into my self-worth, and to reminding myself that I have what it takes. Okay. 2010, I'm feeling good. I'm opening a new business, immersed in work, and a woman with a plan. I don't know if any of you other women have plans, but I have lots of them, and they look certain ways. They're very pretty. And it's super neat and organized, and it looks good, and it feels really good. And then walks in a person with beautiful blue eyes and charisma that makes my soul quiver, and he's not in my plan at all. That feeling I felt was not in my plan. So I did what any person that is quivering in their soul and maybe in other places would do, and asked my friend about him. And his response was, "You don't want anything to do with him. He just had a heart attack a few months ago. He's going through a divorce, and he has 3 kids." I'm a single woman recovering from a trauma, feeling really good in a new business, and that is not at all what my plan looked like, at all. My thought was, you are right. I don't want to have anything to do with that. But a week later, he comes back in, and we're talking about breathing and reducing stress, and he asked me if I can coach him on breathing. And true vulnerability comes in here, and I said, I can't coach you. He asked why, and I said, I'm attracted to you, AKA you make my soul quiver. We go to lunch instead. And there it began, my journey towards being a wife and a step-parent to 3 beautiful children, and it's also where I had the intense fear set in again. You see, the closer I get to people, the more terrified I am of loss. The closer I get, the more scared I get. The more scared I get, the less I want to be seen. Because it's not pretty. It's not that neat little box. Being scared wasn't in my plan. It brings up shame. Ashamed of my feelings because they do not equal success. A really interesting part of my result-oriented personality is I've started doing the work this past year again very intensely, but I don't do it in Sacramento. Why don't I do it in Sacramento? Because I don't want to be seen. So I fly to Montreal to go do it, right? So not even just like out of Sacramento, I'm flying the freaking out of the country to do it. And I'm terrified of flying, so I'm like panicking the whole way there. And that's how bad I don't want to be seen. It's the craziest thing. So that brings me to my intention of 2018, right? What is my intention? It's about we, but it's about we where I used to land and connect and commit in my own community, being seen with the people that I live around, that I know, that I can be vulnerable with. My intention for 2018 is to integrate, connect, because honestly, it's one of the main reasons that we are even on this planet. Integrate and connect because it's what we need in order to survive and thrive, really. Integrate and connect so that we can practice vulnerability as an avenue to overcome shame. Integrate and connect so that we can realize that we are all awesomely imperfect. The perfection and success does not equal neat. The feeling of pain and fear are a gateway to being in joy and happiness. So I stand here, feeling less fear than I did when I started, feeling vulnerability, but also feeling that I have what it takes, that you have what it takes, and that we as a collective consciousness have what it takes. So, to heal in 2018 as an individual so that we can heal as a collective consciousness. Thank you very much for letting me share.